I first discovered the game Trackmania all the way back in 2023, and something that always intrigued me was not striving to be a really good player, but rather striving to be a really good mapper. So within a few months of downloading the game, I created my first ever Trackmania campaign. And what a campaign is an assortment of tracks usually ranked by difficulty and separated into 5 different groups. But that doesn't really matter for this. What does matter is these were some of the first tracks I ever created in the game. So now, over 2.5 years later, I feel like I've improved a lot since this time. So I'm going to be revisiting this campaign for the first time since its creation. And we'll go through and see how much I've improved since then. And that's all you need to know, so subscribe and let's get into it. So here is the campaign. It is 25 maps long and entirely only uses the snow car. So let's start our review on map 1. So something you'll notice immediately with this map is that it doesn't look like my scenery I make nowadays. And that's because at this point I hadn't found my mapping style yet, so I just kind of copied from other maps that I saw, and this is what I made. So immediately I can tell you that it's pretty boring for map 1. There's not much going on. I mean, there's that one engine off section, a bit of trying to keep grip at the end, but other than that, it's fairly press forward, and it basically just feels like a precision map. But overall, I do like this track, though I wish I added more transitions and things that weren't just straight jump, and also have a bit more than just wood and a few items for the scenery. Here's a second map, Beach Break, and this one is a dirt map, if I remember correctly. And it's all about no sliding. You also got to keep grip through this water section. And also at the end here, I believe, yeah, there is a shortcut across here. And it's actually also faster to just drive straight to the finish instead of taking the intended route, which was these dirt patches. Also, you can't really tell from driving it, but a lot of these sections are actually just floating above the water because I forgot to place the supports back underneath, and so like half of it is just floating above the water. But I do actually kind of like the scenery on this track. The mix of the water, the black wood blocks, and the sand block, they all look pretty good together. I mean, the wood is a bit of an eyesore, but it's not that bad, especially for this being one of my first ever tracks. But yeah, honestly, I don't think this track's that bad. Now let's move on to map 3, which is called Chili Challenge. And this one, the scenery is basically the same as the previous one, except this one's snow and blue. And again, it's basically just precision track with a few semi-creative transitions. Well, I mean, I say a few, it's only really this one right here. But at least this one is kind of made to be precision, rather than it just being very boring. If I recall correctly, I think this was also one of my first times using the fog effect, and it is very subtle, but I do think it is there. I also like how I mixed the 2 different types of trees together. I think that looks pretty good. But other than that, the scenery is fairly bland. And I know you might think I'm going to say the same thing on every single map, but the later we get in, the better the maps will be, because the way I made this campaign is that the first maps were my first maps, and the last ones were the last maps I created for the campaign. Apart from a few exceptions though, I think. Now this track, I remember, was absolutely shortcut. So basically here is cruise control for some reason. Then here you have a wood section into the platform around here, through the reset, then reactor, and then up into the finish. But I think if I show you this, you can probably guess where one of the shortcuts are. And the other one, I didn't think was possible, to be honest. But here, Granady goes straight left to the start, and he jumps off here and lands here with reactor, and then cuts around the reset, of course. So you get to keep reactor for a long time. And then the end is basically the exact same. I do like that I was being creative with this map though, because there aren't very many underwater maps in campaigns anymore. I also like these little sharks I added. But anyways, I think if those shortcuts weren't there, I actually would like this map. You know, it's creative, it's unique, And it also isn't just precision. There's also some aspects about like keeping grip and maximizing speed and also not sliding out in the water. But yeah, other than that, I think this map was pretty good. On to the final white map. Here we have the first and only of its kind, I think, multi-lap track. This one is 3 laps long and you start off with the booster. Then this one's basically about keeping speed and snowballing it. So you can't get this booster here, which I didn't realize would be faster. Then you just have like precision, precision, and even more precision. And that's basically all there is to this map. Similar to last map, I do like that I was being creative with doing like a 3-lap map, because this was before they started doing in the campaign recently, because this map was released all the way back at the end of 2024. The scenery isn't terrible other than this section over here where I guess I just didn't want to try, but like over here, I think the scenery is fine. Overall, this map is just decent. You know, it's nothing too special, but it's also not bad. Map 6 of the campaign, I remember, was one of my favorite of the early maps, because this one is a snow car full speed map, which is again kind of precision, but this one is less precision based. I feel like this kind of swing back and forth and then keeping grip right here, it was pretty fun for me to play if I remember. So yeah, I do like the route on this track. And same with the scenery. It doesn't have anything special about it that's gonna make you remember it, but it just all around looks pretty good. And that's honestly how I would describe this campaign. Map 7 here, I again remember, has a shortcut, which is kind of sad because this is when I started actually having some creativity in my transitions. Because it starts off with one of my favorite transitions from this campaign into a slow-mo block and a reset. To be honest, I don't know why it was there in the first place, but then the rest of the map you drive on the sausage, and then there's also a risky in the finish with a bobsleigh block placed upside down, and I was honestly pretty proud of this. Also, you might notice there is a bit of a secret behind the waterfall, which I don't know if anyone even saw them. As you can see here, I started getting a bit better with the scenery. Like I started adding more detail to elements, like I had this section with these like pillars holding it up, and like here with these support blocks along here. Also, here's the fun fact for you. This used to be my club background before it changed the new one, which was when Switch Shorts started. But yeah, that's a little lore for you. But anyways, the shortcut they do on this one is they do a clean jump right there, and then they jump around the slow-mo block, which from this looks fairly easy to do, but trust me, it is hard, because you have to thread the needle under this while also not hitting the slow-mo block on the left, which they are so close to hitting. And then you also have to land with speed. And these 3 all did that. But of course, Granady was the one who came out on top. But anyways, next up, we have the best map of the campaign, the 08 track. It's pretty basic as 08s go. I actually don't know when this record was broken. I thought Granady still had it. But wait, before I show you the record, I just want to show you the intended route. Or not the intended, the one I thought would be the fastest would be to jump out of here and land here, so you reduce airtime. But I don't think the world record does that. They do jump to the same area, but then they just press forward. Actually, this guy does do a little side jump, and I think that's actually what makes him keep the lead, because I don't think he was 1400ths ahead by this point. But yeah, the end is just a press forward slow-mo into the finish. I think I could have been a bit more creative with the 08, but at least it wasn't just the simple downhill blocks. There was a bit of variation. You know, you had some steep ones, some shallow ones, some straight blocks, some 2-block long ones. I do think it would be way better though if it didn't have this terrible end. And also, I don't know why these signs are different, but still pretty good as 08s go. Map 9, Ignition Isolation. This track was actually gonna be later in the campaign, but weirdly, the reason that it's number 9 is because I thought of the name Ignition Isolation, which I is the 9th letter in the alphabet, and so that's why this map is number 9. And the reason it's called this is because the whole map is basically engine off, and it also has this risky finish at the end, which is a little hard to see if you don't know if it's there. But yeah, it starts off the engine off here, a little precision tech section, and the booster into the engine off, and then engine off here, and then another one here, and then you saw this end before. Out of the first 10 maps, this one's probably my favorite, and you can also tell that I did get a bit better with my scenery. I do like these things though, with like the propeller on it. Also, for some reason, most of the maps are all like encased in with big walls, and I honestly don't know why I did that because it just doesn't look good now that I think about it. But I guess back then I must have thought this looked good. But then again, I don't think any of these maps really look that good, so maybe it's just hindsight. Here we have the big map 10 up next. This one is the second full dirt track, I believe. It is really just about no sliding through these sections. If you get enough speed from this section, you can jump all the way over these bumps. And these bumps really slow you down a lot. And as well, there's also a shortcut in the end. But I have to come clean about the shortcut. This was actually intended to be like an intended shortcut, because for some reason I thought that there wouldn't be a single shortcut in the campaign, so I decided to add one of my own. And that's why this section is kind of just like a press forward just turn, is because this was like never intended to be here. But instead of making shortcuts, I should have been patching them out because there's a lot in this campaign. I'm also not a big fan how I mix like every single tree here, plus also the cacti. I do think it looks good, but not with like the red and the black. Also, I think this is one of the exceptions where this map was made way later down the line rather than it just being the 10th map I made. I think it's because I wanted to do something special for map 10, but then I didn't end up doing it, so I just made this map. But yeah, this map is fairly simple. It's really just about no sliding and getting a bunch of speed, which is why Granady obviously has the world record. Next up, map 11. I remember this track, and not for the right reason. You see, the reason it's called Killer Night is because it's about driving on the castle blocks, and the whole map is just like a dirt map with the castle blocks, where you got like no slide around this corner, no slide around this corner, and then you got engine off, and you just got a snowball speed into the finish. But for some reason, around every part, I added this platform block, so you really don't have to drive on the castle blocks, other than to get the checkpoint. So they drive the first part of the map as intended, but then at this point, they literally just jump off, completely skip that turn, and they have way more speed than usual. So they barely avoid every wall and get into the finish, saving probably about 0.5 because that dirt section is pretty slow. The next map, I don't believe has a shortcut. And also when I was making this campaign, I think this was one of my favorites because this is like the Granady map. Because the route is cohesive and not too difficult, but also is fairly creative with the transitions, like this one, for example. But I think it'd be better if I just show you the run. So you get reactor there, and then you jump all the way down here, land, precision, and then keep grip here. And then you can just barely keep grip on two wheels. Here is intended shortcut, and then a slow-mo into the finish. I did that on a lot of maps, and I'm not really sure why. But here, this is basically indicating where to jump, because I believe you can jump straight down here, but it's very hard to keep speed if you jump really far. So the fastest is like to jump here and land just to the top of this block. And also, I did start building a bit of an identity with my scenery. You know, again, we have the big wooden wall with a bit of detail on it, plus the audience blocks. So I think this was around when I started really developing my style, because if we look at the next map, it's probably fairly similar. And no, that is not the case. This map is one of the outliers of the campaign. I really just tried to do something different with this one. I just kind of had the idea of like going down a mountain, which is obviously why it's called Mountain March. And also, this is one of the maps where I thought I actually cooked, but if you look at the difference between author time and world record, there is unfortunately a shortcut, and a big one at that. So the beginning of the map is the same, you collect this checkpoint up here, and then collect this one. But I forgot to add a checkpoint for this element, so you literally can just skip right to the end. In my run, I also do the shortcuts, so I'll just do one run quickly to show you what they skipped. You could also see how much better I've gotten at snow car. But this section is just kind of an uphill with a little curve and then a downhill into the finish. So if we're counting, that is 1, 2, technically 3, 4, 5. Through 13 maps, there's been 6 shortcuts, which is kind of insane. This next map, Nascent Notion, was a track where I tried to do something different with the scenery, and I am pretty proud with how it looks. I can't remember which map it was, but there was a map that had a similar kind of scenery style where it was just a bunch of these wooden blocks. So I decided to do that for my map, and I think it does look fairly good. Plus the route also is pretty decent. This one's a sausage track. This transition is a bit wonky. It looks clean here, but sometimes you just don't get the cleanest landing. Sometimes you would clip on this block. That's why I added the plastic there. But then this final transition, I really like, which is a jump from the sausage into a ramp. And then this end section is a jump onto the sausage block and into the finish. I don't know why it's tilted down. But yeah, that's this track, number 14. And on to number 15, we have probably my favorite map of the entire campaign. Like, this is probably the only track where I could say I think I did pretty good for the scenery. And as you can see, it's because I put way more time and effort into these sections. I definitely still wouldn't say it's as good as the tracks I release now. But I mean, like, for this time, this is a very good track. And also, the route is also pretty fun. It is kind of just a tech track, but it also involves skipping penalty, getting clean transitions, keeping grip, you know, like everything. And it's just fun to hunt. And also, unlike a lot of the maps from this campaign, this one doesn't have a shortcut. So yeah, I honestly don't have any criticisms about this track. And I think the same goes for map 16. And also added a bit of new stuff, like these water blocks around the edges, or like these upside down half pipes going over some sections. And if we take a look at the route, it starts off pretty slowly with just simple bobsleigh lines. I thought that they cut in between those pillars right here, but apparently they don't. But anyways, yeah, it's just a fairly simple, slow, but still fun track, especially for it being snob. Onto map 17. Now this one, I have to say, it's gotta be the worst map of the campaign. A big issue when I was making this track is that I would play a section and then later on I would realize it's not calculated in the slightest. So for example, this section, the reason there's like a reactor and then a reset straight away is because there was initially an issue there. And then here I placed boosters for double respawn. And also I added a risky line right here, which is supposed to reward you if you have a lot of speed. And here you overjump it by a fair amount, and that's why there's the reactors here, so that you don't fully overjump it. And then this section I think looks pretty cool. It's probably the one good bit of this track. And then this section is also not very clean. Same with this one. That's why you see all these gates here with like engine off and reset and stuff, is because I would either have too little speed or too much speed, so I would have to adapt to that. But enough yapping, let's just show you the run. So the beginning isn't that bad. You know, you just gotta keep enough speed here. And then let me slow it down a bit. In this section, you can turn sharp enough to get the red boosters and completely overjump those anti-boosters. And that way you have way too much speed. So in this section, you overjump a lot of stuff. And also in this wood section, it's almost impossible to keep full grip, but Granady somehow does it. And then jumps into the risky finish. Now, the route of this track definitely could have used some work. Probably could have been fully scrapped, to be honest. But the scenery, I spent way too much time on it. Like, I'm saying that in a good way, as I spent so much time on the scenery for such a bad route. Like, I added a bunch of detail here with these things and the roadblocks and the pillars and flags. But I do think my scenery did take a step up around this point. I did kind of have the similar big walls around the outside with a bunch of big signs all around. So I would definitely change that if I were to make this again. But at this point, the scenery starts looking more like my scenery nowadays. Now onto map 18, which is close to being my favorite map of the campaign. Anyways, for this map, the style was wet plastic reactor snow car, which at this point was pretty rare of a thing to see. Of course, nowadays things like this is common in stuff like Bong Cup, but honestly, I think I was one of the pioneers of this style, though I'm not really sure if that's something you want to be proud of. Anyways, let me just show you the map. The way you have to drive it is you have to basically turn your car like fully sideways and also hug the plastic walls to keep speed. So you see here, they go fully sideways, and then here you also do an intended plastic bounce, and then here you do, I don't know what to call it, reactor up drift, I guess. So because the tires are wet and you have reactor up, the car basically slides over the plastic, which again is something that I don't see very often. Anyways, that's the route, but now we gotta talk about the scenery. And I could definitely say I wouldn't do scenery like this nowadays, but for its time, I think it's okay. You know, it's got a fair amount of detail around, it doesn't look super ugly. I also do like how I kept a consistent black and blue theme throughout the map, which is something I didn't do very much in the earlier maps. And also at the time these signs were blue, so it probably looked better back then. And I remember this scenery took me a while, and I feel like that does kind of come across in the map, where it almost seems like it's like, yeah, I'm just gonna add something here, something there. And most of it works together, some parts do kind of stand out for being different. So yeah, I do think I definitely could have done better with this scenery. Editing Cyber here, I realized there was something I forgot to show you in this map, and that is the secret that lays underneath the map. All you have to do is go here, go inside this black structure, and then through this corridor, jump down here, and once you get here, you drive up here, and you get jump scared by this cat. I don't know why this is here, to be honest, but I think throughout some other maps there is also some other secrets, but I honestly don't remember where they are. So if you find any, then let me know by posting in my Discord or sending me a message somewhere. Now let's get back on track to map 19. Map 19, Stunt Street, is exactly what it says on the tin. It's basically about doing a bunch of different wacky transitions, and I do think certain transitions like this beginning one is a little weird. This one I think is pretty good, and same with this one and this one. But then afterwards I think I kind of just like ran out of creativity because it's basically just normal tech all the way into the finish. And I do think the scenery for this one was a little rushed. Like, it's basically just wood and the audience blocks, and there's not much else to it. So yeah, I definitely do wish I put more time into it. On to map 20. Here we are back again with, you guessed it, more shortcuts. But before I show you those shortcuts, by the way, I don't know why the contrast is so high on this map, but basically the intended route is jumping up here and then going onto the wood underneath and then back up around here, down here, through this section, and then there's a risky finish here and a safe finish here. But as you'll notice in this run, they don't do any of that. So already in the map, they jump straight to the second last checkpoint and drive the map as intended, kind of, until the last checkpoint. And then they jump to the first checkpoint, drive up here, and go past the barrier and into the finish. Now let me see what Granady did. So he crashes the wall, taps the red booster, and gets a lot of speed, but I don't think that it's faster. Yeah, it definitely isn't, because he was ahead at this point. So if he would have just driven normally, he would have had the world record. But yeah, anyways, he does the same end route and sneaks into the finish from behind, saving about 2.5 seconds over the intended route, I believe. And also, this map was basically a copy of a previous map I made, except I added a bunch of scenery and then put the campaign label on it. So if you're wondering, that's why it looks pretty bad. But lucky for me, these last 5 maps, both the scenery and the route get way better. But I did forget about this map. This one, again, has a few shortcuts. Already in the start, you can see they jump straight there to save probably about 0.5 seconds. And then they keep grip in a lot of places and do some low jumps, which gives them a lot of speed. And then they cut through here to skip this tech section right here. And then skip the ramp, take the reactor, and jump into the finish. And I think all those shortcuts combined saves about 3 seconds. But when making this map, I obviously didn't know about those shortcuts, and I will honestly like this track. I tried to do something different with it, and it kind of worked, except for the fact that I just completely forgot to do cut fixes. And the scenery is, again, pretty similar to some of the previous tracks. Nothing too special about it, but not terrible looking. Map 22, Vague Venture, is probably my third or second favorite map of the campaign, depending on the other two I was talking about. This one I actually thought about submitting for Cup of the Day, but I decided against it because people just don't like snow card tracks in that. Trust me, I've tried to get a few Cup of the Days, they never like it. Let me show you what a run of this track looks like, and when you do it good, it looks pretty good. This section is a bit uncalculated, but it works fine. And this is probably my favorite part of the track because of how smooth it is. And then you have another tech section plus a reactor, which, lucky for me, didn't cause a shortcut. And I also like this finish where it's like you're jumping into the spinning block, which I think I stole from some other track, but no one has to know that. And the scenery for this track kind of reminds me of one I did for my desert campaign, which was the successor to this campaign, which was called Summer Sands and was just like this, but except with all the maps were desert car. And if you want to see me go through that campaign just like this, then subscribe and let me know in the comments below. Now we only got 3 maps left, map 23 being Winter Wish, and this track does look different from my normal scenery style. And the reason for that is that this isn't my track. Yeah, I know I'm a fraud. But in all seriousness, the reason this map is in the campaign is because I was just going through TMX back in like October, I think, a few months before this campaign release. And I stumbled upon this track, which was called Chill by Trackmania. And I just thought this map kind of looks like my scenery style, and it kind of looked like a campaign map. So I reached out to him and I asked him if I could use it, and he said yes. So I decided to include it as map 23 of the campaign. But now that I think about it, I don't know why I didn't label it here that was his map, because unless you like looked at some like subtext, then there's probably a big chance you didn't even realize that this wasn't my map. But anyways, controversies aside, this map is actually really well made by Trackmania. It has a similar sort of feel to the wet plastic map that I made earlier in the campaign, except this one involves snow and reactor, and also had this pretty difficult risky finish, because if you went too low and touched the water, then you would get wet tires on wood, which slows you down by a lot. But anyways, for this map, I'm not going to really say anything about the scenery. I mean, I will say it looks good. And yeah, this is just a good map by Trackmania. Now we're on to the second to last map. This one is fairly simple. It's just a snow car tech track, almost in the style of a map 21 from a campaign. It's fairly easy to complete because of how simple most of the turns are, but it is very hard to optimize, which is why Granady has a 0.7 lead over second place, and also why I fall behind so far in the start, because I'm nowhere near these people's skill level. But yeah, there's not really many elements in this map that stand out a whole lot. It's kind of just full tech, but the scenery though does stand out a fair amount. As you can see, there is a lot of items that I placed. You got these custom cactuses, you got these things, you got trees, you got all the trees up here. I do think I did good in adding detail almost everywhere, but what I would change now is having more supports, because here it looks like it's held up by that, but basically everywhere else it just kind of looks like it's floating, which is something I don't like to have in my maps. But besides that, this is still some of the best scenery I had in this campaign. Like, even if you look along the wall, you can tell that I put detail almost everywhere I could, which is a big improvement from the earlier maps of this campaign. And like, for example, here you got these blocks, you got this support holding the sign, you got plastic blocks, and like here you got the plastic up here, you got the trees, you got the sand, and you also got this structure behind. All in all, I don't really have many complaints about this map. Now, finally, we are on the last map, map 25. Before I show you a run on this track, I just want to show you the top-down view so you can see how much work I put into it. Like, look at this. Like, you can tell I put a lot of work into this. And dare I say, I think this is the best scenery in the whole campaign. And the route is also close to being one of the best. But you can watch it for yourself and tell me what you think. So the map starts off with a tight tech section with reactor, so you build up a lot of speed, and then engine off into sausage, into bobsleigh with a bit of a shaky landing, and then reactor again with more tech where you get a lot of speed, and then another reactor to keep you from flying, transition. This section I really like, the transition here into the tech, into the cruise control, and then a jump out of the sausage, and then you gotta keep grip with the fragile, and another tech section into a bunch of effect blocks into the finish. Now that I look back on it, there is a lot of tech in this map and not many other surfaces. I mean, you got this one bobsleigh section, but other than that, I don't think there is any other surfaces yet. It is fully tech. And I also just want to say how well this turn flows, because you don't have to release at all, and you can just barely keep grip while not crashing and damaging your car from the fragile. But yeah, there's the whole of my first ever campaign that I made in this game called Autumn Freeze. If you want to play it for yourself, then just go to my club, go to campaigns, snow car, and it's right there. It's the only one. And let me know in the comments if you want to see me go through my second campaign, Summer Sands, and react to all the records and tell you about how I made it. But anyways, I hope you learned something new today, and now, see you next time.